They say that touch can heal. But what happens when the hands meant to soothe become the ones that awaken? My name is Ara, and I'm about to tell you a story about walls, the ones we build to protect ourselves, and the ones that end up becoming our prison. It's a story about a woman who lived in a fortress of glass and steel, hiding from a world that had already taken everything from her. And it's a story about me, a woman so focused on surviving that I forgot what it meant to live. I was her therapist. She was my client. There were rules, boundaries, lines we weren't supposed to cross. But some connections are too powerful to ignore. Some touches speak louder than words ever could. There would come a moment, one single moment on a bright Friday afternoon, when she would whisper two words that would change everything. Go lower. Two words. A universe of meaning. A choice that would tear down every wall between us. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you about the house. The house didn't have a name, but it had a presence. It stood on a cliff overlooking a perpetually gray sea, a monument of glass and steel that seemed to defy the very concept of comfort. The first time I drove up that winding, cypress-lined driveway, my little car felt like an insect crawling toward a predator. I was a massage therapist, not an architect. But even I could tell this place was designed to be looked at, not lived in. It was a fortress of solitude, and I had been summoned to breach its walls for 90 minutes, twice a week. The job came through a high-end agency that catered to clients who valued discretion above all else. The pay was ludicrous enough to cover my rent and my sister's tuition with plenty to spare. It was the kind of money that made you not ask questions. The client's name was simply Thorne. No first name, no title, just Thorne. The agency notes were sparse. Chronic back and shoulder pain, tension, headaches, prefers deep tissue. No conversation during the session. Simple enough. Professional. I was good at professional. Professional was a wall I could hide behind. And lately, I needed all the walls I could get. The woman who greeted me at the door was not what I expected. I'd pictured someone older, brittle. But Thorne was maybe in her early 40s, with a tall, lean strength that her simple gray cashmere sweater couldn't hide. Her hair was a severe black, pulled back from a face that was all sharp angles and guarded intelligence. Her eyes, the color of the sea outside her window, assessed me in a single, sweeping glance that made me feel entirely transparent. She didn't smile. She just nodded toward the sweeping staircase. The room is at the top of the stairs, to the left. You'll find everything you need. Her voice was low, a velvet rasp that seemed to catch on the silence of the house. The massage room was as sterile as a clinic, but with a view that could break your heart. A single table stood in the center, facing a floor-to-ceiling window that framed the churning ocean. Fresh linens, a cabinet of expensive, unscented oils, a heated towel warmer. Everything was pristine. I set up my own small kit, the familiar click of my oil bottles, a small comfort in the unnerving quiet. When Thorne entered minutes later, she was already undressed, a thick white towel wrapped around her torso. She moved without self-consciousness, her posture rigid, her focus already somewhere far away. She lay face down on the table without a word, pulling the top sheet up to her waist. My hands, usually so steady, felt clumsy as I applied the first layer of oil. Her skin was cool, smooth, but beneath the surface, her muscles were a roadmap of tension. Her back was a landscape of knots, each one a tightly held secret. Along her left shoulder blade, a web of silvery scars crisscrossed the skin, pale and old, like lightning frozen under glass. I said nothing. My job was to work the muscle, not the memory. I started with broad, warming strokes, my thumbs methodically seeking out the trigger points. Her body was unyielding, a fortress just like her house. She didn't flinch, didn't sigh, didn't give any indication that I was even there. The only sound was the rhythm of my own breathing and the distant roar of waves crashing against the cliffs below. It felt less like a massage and more like an excavation. I was digging through layers of stone, searching for something soft beneath. After 90 minutes, I had barely scratched the surface. As I placed the final warm towel on her back, her voice startled me, muffled by the headrest. That's sufficient. It wasn't a compliment. It was a dismissal. The weeks fell into a rhythm. Tuesdays and Fridays. I'd drive up the winding road, the sea a different shade of gray each time. I'd enter the silent house, climb the stairs, and find Thorne already on the table, a still life of tension. I learned the landscape of her body. I knew the precise location of the knot under her right rhomboid that felt like a marble embedded in steel. I knew the way the muscles in her neck and shoulders were perpetually braced, as if for an impact that had already happened long ago. I learned the story her body told, even if she never spoke a word of it. The scars, I realized, were from an accident. The way the tissue had healed, the pull on the surrounding muscles, it spoke of a violent, shattering impact and a long, painful recovery. I remained professional. I was a ghost in her house. My hands the only part of me that existed. But in the silence, my mind would wander. I'd wonder what she did in this vast, empty house all day. I'd notice a single volume of poetry on a bedside table, or the faint scent of jasmine tea in the air. These were tiny cracks in the facade, glimpses of the person beneath the armor. I found myself looking forward to our sessions, to the strange, silent intimacy of the room. It was a dangerous feeling. She was my client. She was a puzzle I was being paid to solve with my hands. Nothing more. I would repeat this to myself on the drive home. The outrageous sum she paid me. A stark reminder of the chasm between our worlds. The money was a cage. A beautiful, comfortable cage that kept the boundary firmly in place. One Tuesday, a storm rolled in off the ocean. The sky turned a bruised purple, and rain lashed against the giant window. The sound of the wind and crashing waves filled the room, a wild soundtrack to our silent ritual. Thorne was different that day. Her usual tension was amplified, a frantic energy humming just beneath her skin. As I worked on her shoulders, I could feel a tremor in her muscles. When I moved to her hands, intending to do some gentle stretching, her fingers curled into a tight fist as my thumb brushed her palm. She flinched a sharp, involuntary jerk. It was the most unguarded reaction she had ever given me. I paused, my hand hovering over hers. "It's okay," I whispered, the words swallowed by the storm. I don't know why I said it. It was a breach of our unspoken contract. But I didn't take my hand away. After a moment that stretched for an eternity, her fist slowly, hesitantly uncurled. I gently worked the muscles of her palm and fingers, and for the first time, I felt something other than resistance. I felt surrender. When the session ended, the usual, "That's sufficient," was replaced by a quiet, almost inaudible, "Thank you." The storm outside was still raging, but inside the room, something had settled. After the day of the storm, the silence between us changed. It was no longer a void, but a space filled with unspoken things. The fortress had a hairline fracture, and I was terrified and thrilled by it. Thorne began to speak. Not much, but enough to disrupt the established order. "The traffic was bad today," she might murmur as I worked on her upper back, her voice still raspy with disuse. Or, "That oil has a pleasant scent. What is it?" It was lavender, the same oil I'd used for months. The fact that she was noticing now felt significant. I kept my answers brief, polite, a desperate attempt to shore up the crumbling wall of professionalism. But it was useless. A connection had been forged in that storm, a current now running between us that I couldn't ignore. I started to see her, really see her, not just as a collection of tense muscles, but as a woman encased in loneliness. I saw the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her long fingers would trace the rim of a teacup she sometimes brought into the room, a silent companion. The house, once so intimidating, now just seemed sad, an empty vessel for a solitary life. My feelings for her began to shift from professional curiosity to a deep, aching empathy, which soon curdled into something more potent, something that felt dangerously like desire. I wanted to know the story of her scars, the reason for her isolation. I wanted to be the one to finally smooth the permanent furrow between her brows. I hated myself for it. This was my job, the best paying job I'd ever had. I couldn't afford to ruin it with a pathetic, unprofessional crush. I was the help. She was Thorne. End of story. I would lecture myself, try to force my thoughts back into their designated boxes, but then I would place my hands on her back, feel the subtle shift in her breathing as she relaxed under my touch, and all my resolve would melt away. The tension culminated on a bright, deceptively calm Friday afternoon. The sun was glittering on the water, making the room feel warm and strangely hopeful. Thorne was on the table, as still and silent as ever, but the energy between us was electric. I could feel it in the air, in the way my own heart hammered against my ribs. I worked through my usual routine, my hands moving with a confidence born of repetition, shoulders, neck, arms, back. I saved her lower back and glutes for last, the areas where she held the deepest, most stubborn tension. This part of the massage always required the most focus, a careful navigation of powerful muscles and intimate territory. I worked on her piriformis, a small muscle deep within the glutes that can cause immense pain when tight. My touch was clinical, precise. I was acutely aware of the boundary, the thin cotton sheet separating my hands from her skin, the invisible line between therapist and client. I moved to the muscles at the top of her thigh, my pressure firm and even. The room was utterly silent, save for the distant cry of a gull. Her breathing was slow, controlled. My own was shallow, caught in my throat. And then her voice, low and rough, shattered the stillness. Go lower. Time stopped. The gull's cry, the distant waves, the beat of my own heart, it all went silent. My hands froze on her leg. Go lower. 2 words. A simple instruction. But it was a command loaded with a universe of meaning. It was a question, a plea, a permission slip. My mind raced, a frantic spiral of panic and possibility. Was this a test of my professionalism? Was she crossing a line, or inviting me to? If I misunderstood, I would lose this job, this lifeline. If I ignored it, I would be rejecting something true and fragile that had grown between us in this silent room. My entire body felt hot, my palms suddenly slick with oil and sweat. I could feel her waiting, her body preternaturally still beneath my hands. She wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. The entire world was holding its breath, waiting for my decision. I looked at my hands on her body, then out the window at the endless, indifferent sea. I had spent so long hiding behind walls, both my own and the ones this job provided. For the first time, I considered what it would feel like to step out from behind them. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting it fill my lungs. I didn't move my hands in the way my panic suggested, not in a way that was overtly sexual or unprofessional. Instead, I acknowledged the intimacy of the request with the language I knew best: touch. I shifted my focus, my energy. I let my hands drift down from the hip, following the long, elegant line of her IT band along her outer thigh. My pressure was still therapeutic, my intent still focused on releasing tension. But the touch itself was different. It was a response. It was an answer. It was me saying, I hear you. I am here with you. I am not afraid. I felt a tremor run through her, a deep, shuddering sigh that seemed to pull up from the soles of her feet. It was a sound of release, of surrender. It was the sound of a wall crumbling to dust. The rest of the massage passed in a dreamlike state. Every touch was charged, every stroke a new sentence in a conversation we were finally having. The professional boundary had not just been crossed, it had been lovingly, carefully dismantled. My hands moved over her body with a new awareness, a tenderness that went beyond technique. I worked down her legs, releasing the tension in her calves, her ankles, even her feet. Each touch was deliberate, meaningful. I was no longer just a therapist working on a client. I was a woman responding to another woman's vulnerability with my own. The silence in the room was no longer empty. It was full, heavy with everything we weren't saying, everything we were saying with our bodies instead. When the 90 minutes were up, I covered her with the warm towel as always, but the ritual felt different, sacred. I moved to leave the room to allow her to dress, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. But her voice stopped me at the door. Ara. She had never used my name before. I turned slowly, my hand still on the doorknob. She was sitting up on the edge of the table, the sheet clutched in one hand, her dark hair falling around her shoulders. The scars on her back were stark in the afternoon light, no longer something to hide, but simply part of her story. Her eyes, those stormy, sea-gray eyes, were fixed on mine, and for the first time, they weren't guarded. They were wide open, vulnerable, and filled with a terrifying, beautiful hope. Stay, she said. It wasn't a command, it was a request. Have tea with me. We sat in her cavernous living room, the space that had once felt so cold and imposing. With her in it, sitting across from me on a stark white sofa, it felt smaller, more human. She wore a simple silk robe the color of storm clouds, and I was still in my practical black uniform, a laughable contrast that no longer seemed to matter. She poured jasmine tea into delicate porcelain cups, her hands perfectly steady. The scent filled the air between us, floral and warm. For a long time, we just sat, the silence comfortable now, a shared space rather than an empty one. I watched her hands as she held her cup, those long, elegant fingers wrapped around the delicate porcelain. I wondered how many times she'd sat here alone, going through this same ritual with no one to share it with. Finally, she looked down at the faded scars on her own forearm, just visible below the cuff of her robe. It was a car accident, she said, her voice soft. A long time ago. I was a cellist. My husband was driving. She didn't need to say more. Those 3 short sentences painted a complete picture of loss, of a career, of a person, of a life. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to take her hand, but I didn't. Not yet. This house was his design, she continued, gesturing vaguely at the glass walls around us. He loved the drama of it, the statement. I've just been rattling around in it ever since. A ghost in a mausoleum. She gave a small, bitter smile. It was the first smile I had ever seen on her face. It felt like a gift, this sliver of her story, an offering. I felt compelled to offer something in return. My sister, I began, my voice feeling thick in my throat. She's at conservatory, for violin. The money from working here. It's for her. I didn't say that our parents were gone, that I was all she had, that the fear of failing her was a constant, heavy weight on my shoulders. I didn't have to. I saw in Thorne's eyes that she understood. She understood the weight of responsibility, the cage of obligation, the way love can sometimes feel like drowning. You gave up something for her, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I was in school, I admitted. Pre-med. But when they died, someone had to. She was only 14. She needed stability, not a sister who was drowning in student debt and working 80-hour weeks. Thorne nodded slowly. And massage therapy? I'd been doing it part-time to help with tuition. It became full-time. It's good work, honest work, but it wasn't the plan. Plans, Thorne said, with that bitter smile again. I was supposed to play with the symphony. My husband was supposed to build monuments that would outlast us both. We were supposed to grow old together in this ridiculous house. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Instead, I woke up in a hospital 3 months after the accident. They told me he was gone. They told me I'd never play again, not professionally. The nerve damage was too extensive. She flexed her left hand, and I could see the slight tremor, the way the fingers didn't quite move in unison. So now I live in his monument, alone, a living ghost haunting a dead man's dream. The pain in her voice was raw, and I couldn't stop myself anymore. I set down my cup and moved to sit beside her on the sofa, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. "You're not a ghost," I said firmly. "Ghosts don't feel. They don't hurt. They don't." I hesitated, then pushed forward. "They don't reach out." She turned to look at me, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly undid me. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be a person anymore. I've been alone for so long, I've forgotten how to let anyone in." "You let me in today," I said softly. "I shouldn't have. It was unprofessional. I put you in an impossible position. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry." The words came out more forcefully than I intended. "Please don't be sorry for that." She searched my face, looking for something reassurance, permission, absolution. "When you touch me," she said, her voice barely audible, "it's the only time I feel real, the only time I feel anything at all. And today, I needed more. I needed to know if you felt it too, or if I was imagining it." My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. "You're not imagining it," I said. The space between us felt impossibly small and infinitely vast at the same time. "I'm your client," she said, but there was no conviction in it. "You work for me. There's a power dynamic. I know," I interrupted. "I know all the reasons this is complicated. I know all the ways this could go wrong. I've been lecturing myself about it for weeks. And I don't care anymore," I admitted. "I can't keep pretending that what happens in that room is just professional, that you're just a client, that I don't think about you every moment I'm not here." She drew in a sharp breath. "Ara, you don't have to say anything," I said quickly. "I just needed you to know that you're not alone in this, that whatever this is, it's not one-sided." For a long moment, she just looked at me. Then, slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took my hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm despite the slight tremor. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental, a bridge spanning the chasm between us. "I haven't touched anyone like this in years," she said, looking down at our joined hands. "Not since before the accident." I couldn't bear it. Every touch was a reminder of what I'd lost, what I couldn't do anymore. "And now?" I asked gently. "Now," she lifted her eyes to mine. "Now it feels like remembering how to breathe." We talked for over an hour. About music, her love for the cello, the way it had felt like an extension of her own voice, the grief of losing that connection. About my sister Emma, her fierce dedication to the violin, the way she could lose herself completely in a piece of music. "I'd like to hear her play someday," Thorne said. If you'd want that." The offer was casual, but the implication wasn't. It was a statement of intent, a suggestion of a future where this, whatever this was, continued beyond today. "She'd love that," I said. "She's actually playing in a recital next month. Small venue, nothing fancy, but..." "I'd like to come," Thorne said. "If you'd want me there." "I'd want that," I said, and the smile that broke across her face was like sunrise. We talked about the sea, about how she'd spend hours just watching the waves, finding a strange comfort in their relentless rhythm, about loneliness, the kind that settles into your bones and makes a home there. "I thought I was protecting myself," she said, "keeping everyone at a distance. No one could hurt me if I never let anyone close. But it turns out, isolation is its own kind of pain." "I know," I said. "I've been doing the same thing, telling myself that the only thing that mattered was taking care of Emma, that I didn't have time for anything else. But really, I was just scared." "Scared of what?" "Of failing, of letting someone in and having them leave, of not being enough." Thorne squeezed my hand. "You're enough," she said simply. "More than enough." The words settled over me like a warm blanket, soothing aches I didn't even know I had. When I finally looked at the clock, I was shocked to see that nearly 2 hours had passed. The sun was setting, casting long golden light across the steel and glass, turning the cold architecture into something warm and beautiful. I should go, I said reluctantly. Emma will be wondering where I am. Thorne nodded, but she didn't let go of my hand. Will you come back? She asked. Tuesday? For the massage? I asked carefully. For tea, she said. And whatever else we want it to be. My breath caught. Yes, I said. I'll come back. She walked me to the door, and this time she stood closer than she ever had before. Close enough that I could see the flecks of green in her gray eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her body. Thank you, Ara, she said. And this time her voice was warm, alive. For what? For seeing me, for not running away, for being brave enough to stay. You were brave too, I said. You asked me to stay. I didn't think you would, she admitted. I'll always stay, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. For a moment, we just stood there, neither of us wanting to be the first to move. Then, with a courage I didn't know I possessed, I reached up and gently touched her cheek. Her skin was soft, and she leaned into my palm with a small sigh. Tuesday, I said softly. Tuesday, she echoed. The drive home felt surreal. The world looked the same winding road, the same cypress trees, the same gray sky. But everything had changed. I had changed. When I walked into our small apartment, Emma was practicing, her bow moving across the strings with that fierce concentration she inherited from our mother. She looked up when I came in, her eyes bright. You're late, she said. Good session? Yeah, I said, and I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face. Really good. She studied me for a moment, then grinned. You look different. Happy. Maybe I am, I admitted. She went back to her practicing, and I sat on the couch, listening to the soaring melody fill our tiny living room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of responsibility. I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I was coming up for air. Tuesday took forever to arrive. I changed my outfit 3 times, trying to find something that struck the right balance between professional and personal. I settled on jeans and a soft green sweater, casual but put together. When I drove up the driveway, my heart was pounding. What if she'd changed her mind? What if the vulnerability of Friday had scared her, and she'd retreated back behind her walls? But when the door opened, all my fears evaporated. Thorne wasn't in her usual severe clothing. She wore a soft blue dress, the color of a calm sky after a storm, and her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and my breath caught in my chest. Hi, she said, and there was a shyness in her voice that was achingly endearing. Hi, I managed. I thought we could talk first today, she said, stepping aside to let me in. If that's okay. That's more than okay. She'd set up tea in the living room, the same delicate cups. But this time there were also small pastries on a plate, a gesture of hospitality that felt significant. We sat on the same sofa, close but not quite touching. The tension between us was different now, not uncomfortable, but charged with possibility. I've been thinking, Thorne said, cradling her cup. About Friday. About what I asked you to do. My stomach tightened. Here it comes, I thought. The regret, the backpedaling. But she continued. I've spent so long being alone that I forgot what it felt like to want something, to want someone. And when I realized I wanted you, it terrified me. And now? I asked carefully. Now I'm still terrified, she admitted. But I'm more terrified of going back to the way things were, of being alone in this house, letting life pass me by while I hide from it. She set down her cup and turned to face me fully. I don't know how to do this, Era, I don't know the rules for whatever this is, but I want to try, if you do. Relief and joy flooded through me in equal measure. I want to try, I said. But we need to figure out the work thing. I can't keep taking your money if we're... If we're what? She asked, and there was a hint of amusement in her voice. I felt my cheeks heat. If we're seeing each other, I finished. Dating. Whatever you want to call it. I don't want to take away your income, she said seriously. I know how important it is for your sister. I have other clients, I said. I can pick up more hours. It'll be tight, but I'll manage. Or, Thorne said slowly, I could hire you for something else. I raised an eyebrow. I've been thinking about starting a foundation, she said. My husband left me. Well, more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. It's just sitting there. I thought maybe I could use it to help young musicians' scholarships, grants for instruments, things like that. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, more animated than I'd ever seen her. I'd need help running it. Someone who understands what it's like to sacrifice for art, to support someone with that kind of talent and dedication. Someone organized, compassionate, good with people. Thorne, think about it, she said. You wouldn't have to answer now, but it would solve our problem, wouldn't it? You'd be working with me, not for me. Partners. Partners. The word hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. I'll think about it, I promised. Good, she smiled. Now, about that massage. I laughed. You still want me to work on you? If you're willing. Those knots don't untie themselves, and your hands are magic. There was something playful in her tone now, a lightness I'd never heard before. All right, I said. But this time, you have to tell me if something doesn't feel right. Talk to me. No more suffering in silence. I can do that, she said. The massage was different this time. The silence was still there, but it was comfortable, intimate. Thorne actually talked, telling me about a book she was reading, asking about Emma's practicing, making small observations about the weather. And when I worked on the areas that held the most tension, she didn't just endure it. She told me when the pressure was too much, when it was just right, when something felt good. It was a revelation, this simple act of communication, of trust. When I finished, she sat up slowly, rolling her shoulders. That was incredible, she said. I actually feel lighter. That's the goal, I said, smiling. She reached out and caught my hand before I could step away. Thank you, she said, for everything. For today, for Friday, for not giving up on me. I couldn't give up on you if I tried, I said honestly. She pulled me closer, and suddenly we were standing face to face, barely a breath between us. Can I? She started, her eyes dropping to my lips. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. Yes, I whispered. She leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. When her lips finally met mine, it was soft, tentative, achingly sweet. She kissed like someone who'd forgotten how, who was remembering the steps of a dance long abandoned. I kissed her back, gentle but sure, letting her set the pace. When we finally pulled apart, her eyes were shining. I haven't done that in so long, she whispered. Neither have I admitted. Really? Really. I've been too busy surviving to think about living. She rested her forehead against mine. Maybe we can learn together, she said. How to live again. I'd like that. We spent the rest of the afternoon together, not as therapist and client, not as employee and employer, but simply as two women discovering each other. She showed me her husband's studio, a room she hadn't entered in years. It was filled with architectural models, drawings, photographs. We sat on the dusty floor, and she told me stories about their life together, their dreams, their arguments, about the accident, about her recovery, about the long years of grief that followed. I think he'd be glad, she said finally, looking around the room, that I'm finally moving forward. He wouldn't have wanted me to stay frozen like this. What was his name? I asked gently. Marcus, she said. And I loved him. I did. But he's gone, and I'm still here. I have to figure out what that means. It means you get to live, I said. However you want. She took my hand. With you? She asked. Is that too fast? Too much? It's terrifying, I admitted. But no, it's not too much. When I finally left that evening, much later than I'd planned, the house no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a beginning. Thorne walked me to my car, and we stood in the fading light, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. Friday? She asked. Friday, I confirmed. And I'll bring Emma, if the offer still stands. For her to meet you, I'd love that, Thorne said, and she meant it. She kissed me again, longer this time, more confident. When we pulled apart, she was smiling, a full, radiant smile that transformed her entire face. Drive safe, she said. I will. As I drove down the winding road, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw her still standing there, watching me go. The glass house glowed in the twilight, no longer cold and imposing, but warm and full of possibility. I thought about walls, the ones we build to protect ourselves, the ones that end up imprisoning us instead. I thought about how terrifying it is to let someone in, to be vulnerable, to risk getting hurt. But I also thought about Thorne's smile, the way her hand felt in mine, the possibility of a future I'd never let myself imagine. We were standing on the precipice of something vast and unknown, like the sea outside her window. And for the first time in my life, looking down at that drop, I wasn't afraid of the fall. I was ready to dive. So that's my story. That's how a lonely massage therapist and a woman locked in a glass fortress found each other. Thorne and I, we're still together, still learning, still growing, still choosing each other every single day. Was it easy? No. Did we have to navigate some complicated situations? Absolutely. But every risk, every vulnerable moment, every time we chose courage over fear, it was worth it. Now it's your turn. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that love can find us in the most unexpected places, that it's never too late to start living again, then do me a favor. Smash that like button. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe to Love Beyond Rules, because there are so many more stories like mine waiting to be told. Stories of women who dared to love beyond boundaries, beyond expectations, beyond the rules. Share this video with someone who needs hope, someone who's been hiding behind walls, someone who forgot what it feels like to be truly seen, and comment below. What's one wall you're ready to tear down? What's one risk you're ready to take for love? I read every single comment. Your stories inspire me. They remind me why I chose to share mine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that love, real, messy, complicated, beautiful love, is always worth the fall. This is Ara, signing off. Remember, love beyond the rules, live beyond the walls. See you in the next story.